Reports of the creature known as Sasquatch, more commonly called Bigfoot, goes back well over a century. In the 1800s, coastal Indian tribes spoke of a large bipedal ape-like being, close to 7 feet tall and covered in a thick, dark fur. Sightings were usually followed by tribesmen finding enormous footprints left behind. Americans originally coined the name Bigfoot in the late 19th century. There were 2 enormous grizzly bears that were decimating the local livestock that they named Bigfoot. It's believed there was some confusion between the news articles and folktales that mixed up the names, and after the 2 bears were killed, the name Bigfoot became synonymous with Sasquatch. Tales of Bigfoot traveled over the years, but gained mainstream attention during the 60s and 70s, mostly due to the Patterson-Gimlin film. The Patterson-Gimlin film was footage from 1967 that the duo had shot in Northern California. It was roughly 60 seconds long and was supposedly the first filmed footage of a Sasquatch. Roger Patterson and his friend Bob Gimlin were horseback riding when they saw the creature and filmed it. They captured the footage near Bluff Creek, which was roughly 25 miles outside of Orleans, California. The footage caught the public's attention, and Patterson appeared on numerous talk shows to discuss it. After that, shows like Mysterious Monsters and In Search Of brought even more attention to the creature. Stories of the unknown and supernatural were very popular at the time, so there were many discussions about the legitimacy of Bigfoot. Some thought it was real, but many thought it was a hoax. The footage has been seen millions of times, with experts claiming it to be debunked, while others still demanding it was genuine. Patterson died of cancer in 1972 and went to his grave swearing the footage was real. Over the years, the stories of Bigfoot continue to turn up in pop culture. Dozens of Bigfoot movies have been made, with most of them showcasing the beast as a monster. There's even been several reality TV shows focusing on either capturing or killing a Bigfoot. Christopher Munch is a filmmaker who'd been following stories about Bigfoot for quite some time. After studying the Sasquatch from a more scientific perspective, he was annoyed at the lack of serious Bigfoot movies. As an audience member, he longed to see a film that presented the creature in a more focused, grounded way. He knew he wasn't alone and felt a sense of the audience's hunger for what he felt was a more truthful portrayal of the Sasquatch. Munch grew up in Southern California with a love of early National Geographic documentaries, as well as surfing documentaries and aerial films of McGillivray and Freeman. He started making films in the 70s when he was a teenager. He had a love of movies and spent a lot of time at the local theaters. One year, he showed some of his work at a Young People's Film Festival, which led to him being hired by the local PBS TV affiliate, where he worked as a crew member for their local current affairs productions. After he turned 18, he wrote and directed 2 films that he wasn't happy with. However, he learned from them and went on to write and direct The Hours and Times, a fictional account of what may have happened when John Lennon and Brian Epstein went on a trip to Spain in 1963, just before the Beatles made it big. The film was very well received and went on to win 3 Independent Awards in 1992. He followed that up with Color of a Brisk and Leaping Day in 1996, The Sleepy Time Gal in 2001, and Harry Plus Max in 2004. During this time, his thoughts kept returning to making a film about the Sasquatch. In 2005, he started writing Day of the Sasquatch, a fictional story that would be a serious take on the legend. He read The Locals by Tom Powell, which opened his eyes further to the Sasquatch phenomenon. He managed to speak with Powell, who gave him further insight into the mysterious creature. Powell introduced him to others who had experiences that changed their lives. They were able to bring him up to speed, but ultimately, he'd need to have his own experiences to better understand. He poured himself into Sasquatch research. He read The Raincoast Sasquatch, The Psychic Sasquatch, In the Footsteps of the Russian Snowman, and even Sasquatch fiction like Marie's Bigfoot Valley and Wildlife. Since these books often left him with more questions than answers, he started investigating things from a more metaphysical perspective. He spent roughly 4 years researching and writing the script for Day of the Sasquatch, which he renamed Letters from the Big Man. He felt the title reflected the evolution of the story and worked better for the film he wanted to make. During this time, he had been trying to get financing for the film. So many Bigfoot movies were horror that he was having trouble getting funding due to investors not understanding his need to make this a serious movie, where Bigfoot is not a monster. They each wanted alterations, none of which were in line with the film he wanted to make. After many meetings, it became clear that if he wanted the film to resemble his vision, he'd have to fund it independently, although this meant the film would have to be fairly low budget. This worked out fine because the movie was meant to be a small, very personal film. It was the story of Sarah, a government hydrologist who's doing a post-fire stream survey and begins to have encounters with the Sasquatch. It would be an intimate examination of one woman and one Sasquatch. Large portions of the film would be Sarah by herself, so he needed a very strong actress who would essentially carry the movie. He funded part of the movie himself, and the rest from some other individual investors. With the budget in place, he was able to start casting. For the main cast, he hired Lily Rabe to play Sarah. Rabe started acting in 2001, with acting credits in movies like No Reservations, What Just Happened, and a brief stint on the TV series Medium. Jason Butler Harner was hired to play Sean. He'd had roles in Next, Changeling, and Moonlight. Munch was friends with famous actress Karen Black, who he brought in for a small role. Brad Dourif's daughter Fiona was hired to play Penny. The 6'5" Isaac C. Singleton Jr. was hired to play the big man. Singleton was no stranger to wearing makeup and costumes. He was one of the soldiers in the 2001 remake of Planet of the Apes, as well as Bo's son in Pirates of the Caribbean. Beyond that, he's done tons of video game voice work from Lord of the Rings, The Battle for Middle-earth, Rainbow Six Vegas, Street Fighter IV, Golden Axe Beast Rider, and many more. The Bigfoot costume was designed by special effects makeup designer Lee Romer, who previously worked on movies like Van Helsing, Wind Talkers, and War of the Worlds. The costume was comprised of many different pieces that all came together to appear seamless. The mask was a series of latex parts that joined together so we could see the actor's facial expressions. With the cast in place, they began filming in southwestern Oregon around Medford and the Coastal Range in the fall of 2009. While most movies revolving around Bigfoot presented him as a villain or even a group of villains, Letters from the Big Man presented him as something more akin to the books Munch had been reading. Bigfoot, or Sasquatch, wasn't a mindless monster, but rather an intelligent, peaceful creature that lived in the woods. The lead, Sarah, is living in isolation on purpose as a way to escape a failed relationship. While there, she gets the impression she's being stalked. She runs into a fellow camper, Sean, and initially thinks that he's the one stalking her. Time passes and soon she discovers what's out there is something else entirely. She comes to realize the presence she feels is a Sasquatch. Over the duration, she gradually accepts what's out there, despite her skepticism. Sarah keeps a journal of her experiences, and the Sasquatch arranges an assortment of sticks, stones, and brush. These are the letters he's giving her, which presents that this isn't just some mindless beast. Since the film wasn't horror, we frequently see the Sasquatch. While sometimes it's hiding in the background, other times we see close-ups, and they're quite effective. It shows the creature thinking rather than stalking or being aggressive. Interwoven into the story are tales of deforestation, solitude, and an acceptance of the unknown. Filming ran for about 6 weeks. The shoot ran into various issues while filming, but nothing out of the ordinary. In every shoot, there's always problems that arise, but thankfully the cast and crew were able to overcome them. The investors in the film were strictly passive and didn't get involved in the production at all, other than to support it. This allowed Munch to make the film he set out to make without having to worry about filming to please the studio. The movie premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2011. It was well received, but unfortunately there was a shortage of serious distribution offers. Some seemed annoyed that this was a Bigfoot drama film and not a Bigfoot horror film. With others, the film was appreciated for what it was, but nobody could figure out how to make a buck on it. This is often a problem with dramas, especially ones without any big-name stars attached. He ran into essentially the same problem he did when he was trying to finance the picture. The movie the studios wanted to sell was a Bigfoot movie like every other one. Falling outside of what was considered marketable, it was labeled as a film that didn't have a lot of commercial appeal. Without distribution, Munch decided a sort of self-distribution model. The movie had a lot of critical praise, so he was able to use that to book the film theatrically, and worked with that to gain word of mouth for the VOD and home video market. While the film was pigeonholed as having limited commercial appeal, there was a market for it. Munch knew there would be a significant portion of folks who were tired of Sasquatch horror films, and would be overjoyed to see the subject matter taken in a serious direction. After filming, Munch shot the short documentary, Sasquatch and Us, as a supplement for the DVD. The documentary included interviews with noted Sasquatch experts, and it was an attempt to deal with the phenomenon in an informal, rather than cinematic way. This was a way to give more information to anyone who was curious enough to watch. It evolved into the YouTube webcast, Speaking of Sasquatch, where he talked to others to discuss theories and encounters within the Sasquatch community. As of currently, they have 8 episodes, and each one is fairly in-depth on the subject. I'll put a link down below if you'd like to check it out. Munch does have a desire to make a sequel. It would be another feature-length film covering even more about the Sasquatch and Sarah's interactions. He doesn't want to make it until he's amassed enough personal experience to be able to say something with authority. He wants to go further into the subject than anyone else has in the past, to shed light on the true nature of these beings. After Letters from the Big Man, Lily Rabe went on to star in the very successful series, American Horror Story. Letters from the Big Man is not the usual kind of film I cover, but that's a good thing. Over the past few years, I've seen a string of Sasquatch horror and exploitation films, each one being worse than the one before it. So seeing this was a major breath of fresh air. While not everyone will believe in the subject matter, the movie is still very much worth watching. It's an emotional journey of a woman who's going through some life changes and encounters something beyond her comprehension. Throughout the film, she has her beliefs challenged, while simultaneously trying to get her life back together. It's also a beautifully shot film, with Munch taking full advantage of the gorgeous landscapes and mountains of Oregon. Lily Rabe is wonderful in the lead, and she has to be. The entire film pretty much relied on her performance. Large portions of the film take place with little to no dialogue, with just her interacting with nature. It's emotionally involving, and by the end, you feel as though you've gone through this journey with her. It's now been more than 10 years since he started investigating the Sasquatch, and Munch is still looking for answers. He feels forever changed by the experience. Whatever your beliefs about the Sasquatch, Letters from the Big Man is a unique attempt to make you think about the subject matter in a different way. It may not change your mind, but at the very least, it'll show you another side of the Sasquatch legend you probably never considered.
You really weren't tracking me yesterday?
No, I wasn't.
Somebody was.
Maybe it was an animal.
On 2 feet?
Maybe a wounded bear.
Practicing for the circus?